We all know white Egypt is a joke, but how did that lie even get started? And how did the Euro clowns sell the idea of whites in Africa anyway? With Napoleon's incursion into northern Africa in the early 19th century, Egypt had finally come back to the white world's attention. While Napoleon's troops were busy giving the Sphinx a nose job, Francois Champollion, a fellow Frenchman, was deciphering the hieroglyphs. Both Champollion and Count de Volney attested to the Egyptians having been Africans. At this time, not even one European or Arab said the Egyptians were white, but then again Champollion and de Volney were not racialists. Unfortunately, it wasn't long after France reminded the white world of Egypt's glory that the white supremacists from the US and Britain rushed to Africa. The white world hadn't taken an interest in Egypt since the time of the Romans, and the Europeans had never cared about Egypt at all. So why the sudden interest? What had changed? What had changed was that there was now a white supremacy myth that was the flimsy glue holding the white world together, and these twisted minds converging on Africa realized that myth was about to come undone. But the white revisionists had one major advantage: the public's ignorance. Black Egypt was merely common knowledge in the global mind, not an established fact. Since mass production of books didn't exist yet, the public had no specific pictures of the Egyptians' own artwork or translation of their writings to attach blackness to. It would be no problem for the revisionists to get the white academic world behind them. After all, the doctrines of black inferiority came from white universities. Most of the book and magazine publishers were white university men, just like the white supremacists who were rewriting Egypt's history. Not only would these colleagues eagerly publish these lies, they'd also ensure anything to the contrary simply wouldn't be printed in books or magazines. The cool, rational analyses of men like Herodotus and Champollion had now been outlawed. The racists were about to rewrite history. These men created Egyptology, the first racial philosophy masquerading as a science. From now on, the Egyptians would no longer be the last word on their own world. White scholars would be the authorities now. They began the whitewashing of Egypt using the popular medium of that day: books. This is a scene of Egyptian women drawn by the Egyptians' own hands. See any pale skin, any blonde hair or blue eyes? But this was what the whites put in their books. This is an image of Princess Kemsit. Her name means the Black Lady. Notice she's being tended by white slaves. But in white books, they show the opposite. Queen T, King Tut's grandmother, and her husband Amenhotep III. You can guess what whites did with those two. And with the advent of movies, their propaganda now had the advantage of sound and moving pictures. No one realized it at the time, but whites were manufacturing their own image library. Since there were no images of white Egyptians, whites simply decided to fabricate their own. Every few years we see another big-budget propaganda piece. Different stories, but always the same lie. And after 100 years of this, the whites' manufactured images are now more familiar to the world than any of the ancient Egyptians' authentic pieces, which whites almost never show. In a world where most people get their information from TV, and they think that what they see in the movies is somehow real, is it any surprise that whites could use their media monopoly to sell the biggest lie in history? And so, black skin would be called tanned. The Egyptians would be reimagined as the same race as the vile Asiatics who they detested. White people would have dreadlocks and kinky hair now. The Nubians would be cast as the authentic blacks. The white writers would try to falsify a contrast between them and the newly minted white Egyptians. The white authors would talk about ancient Egypt, but they used terms meant to remind people of the world of the 19th century. This helped create a false association in the reader's mind between Egypt's mostly winning its wars with Nubia and the European conquest in Africa, as well as slavery in America. All they had to do was leave out 90% of the facts and keep repeating their revised version until it stuck. Here's an example of how they did it. This image is a reproduction that is shown in nearly every white-authored book on Egypt, Tut slaying the Nubians. Whites like to point out that some of the Nubians are jet black. but they always conveniently omit that most of the Nubians are shown as being the same reddish-brown color as Tut and having red hair like Ramses II. And not one of those books will dare show the image on the other side of this funerary box found in Tut's tomb, because it shows Tut riding his chariot over whites who don't look anything like him in form or color. And if this picture of Tut warring with a handful of Nubians who look just like him is proof that the Egyptians hated blacks, then what does it mean when Ramses III rides over an entire ocean of Caucasoids? For whites, it means no way in hell are we going to print this. This image of a rough-looking black prisoner is another white favorite, because of his full lips and flared nostrils, even though Nefertiti has the same features. And neither one of them looks like this white slave. Here's another picture you'll see in all the white books on Egypt. And here's one you won't. White POWs being tortured. Ramses killing a white man while his wife watches in admiration. No Nubians were ever treated like this. Ramses has 3 captives, but only one of them is black. The other 2 are Asiatic and Semitic. Thutmose III has so many whites by the hair you can't even count them. Pictures of the Egyptians torturing and killing whites far exceed the handful showing the same old pictures of Nubian POWs. Yet white writers rarely mention whites as slaves or prisoners. They only say a few sentences about that, and of course they never show the pictures. This is a 200-year-old propaganda war to achieve one sole purpose: deceive the reader into thinking of Egypt and black as 2 separate things. And 2008 was no different. After 30 years of African American scholars proving Egypt was really black, National Geographic put out this feculent propaganda piece. Instead of calling it the Nubian Pharaohs, which at least would have been accurate, they called it the Black Pharaohs, still maintaining the lie that Egypt was white. The caption on this picture says, "Did Queen T have Nubian ancestry? This bust, darkened with age, inspired claims that she did." That's 3 lies for the price of 1. First of all, what proof do they offer that this bust has darkened with age? None. No scientific analysis, no tests of any sort. They simply say it and expect you to buy it. And they don't give us any Egyptian writings or scientific analyses to support this Nubian tea crap either. So who's making these so-called claims then? The editorial board at National Geographic. That's who. They just insert their own unfounded racist opinions into every article and act like that alone is proof. If they're going to say one of Egypt's most celebrated queens was a foreigner, shouldn't they have to back it up with something? What if a black person said, "Was Queen Nefertiti Asiatic? This bust, which has faded with age, has inspired claims that she was." National Geographic would run a front-page story challenging that the sculpture had faded and demanding to know exactly who made those Asiatic claims. Here's another question. If Queen T was Nubian, doesn't that mean her grandson, King Tut, was part Nubian as well, and that this pale reconstruction is a complete fraud? Because the Euro clowns at National Geographic have never said Tut's sculptures have darkened with age. So if Tut's grandmother was black, and National Geographic concedes that his sculptures are accurate to his skin tone, why did they make him look like Casper the Friendly Ghost then? Because it's never been about Egypt. It's about supporting the myth of white supremacy that undergirds European power today. The Euro clowns realize they're losing. Not long ago they said no blacks built Egypt. Now that science has proven them wrong, they're trying to claim the Ethiopians are Caucasians. Because many Ethiopians have narrow noses, whites think they can use that to claim Ethiopians aren't like those other Africans who have bones in their noses and plates in their lips. I guess no one ever told the Europeans that it's the Ethiopians, like the Surma and Mercy tribes, who put plates in their women's lips. So if Ethiopians really are Caucasians, then that means it's whites who don't have any better sense than to put dinnerware in their mouths. Didn't see that one coming, did we? Maybe next time you'll think before you lie. Whites have been taught to worship themselves. Perhaps they should have chosen another god. One who was smarter.